Hi, my name's Jeremy Marshall, and if you've watched my first one, you're going to know my story. Very briefly, I've been living with incurable cancer for the last 5 years. And what I was talking about in the previous one was about fear. Fear, that's the dominant emotion that I experience. And one thing that really helps me um, in struggling with fear and with anxiety, which I think we all do to some extent, and especially in lockdown, yeah, some of the stories in the eyewitness accounts about Jesus's life in the Bible. I believe those to be true. If you're not sure, have a look for yourself. But one of the stories in particular is very relevant. One day, Jesus says to his disciples, his followers, "Let's go to the other side of the lake." Now, these are experienced fishermen, right? They're used to the Lake of Galilee, which is quite a big lake in the northeast of Palestine of Israel. And they get into the boat, and everything to start with goes fine. And maybe that's like life, right? Everything seems to be going okay. And then suddenly something happens because in the middle of the lake, a tremendous storm blows up out of nothing. And the disciples, they know what they're doing. This is their work environment. Most of them are fishermen. So they no doubt adjust the sails and put the bow of the ship in the right direction, and they start bailing out. But the boat is sinking. The boat is sinking, and they're terrified. Meanwhile, what about Jesus? Well, he's fast asleep. Water's pouring in, but he's fast asleep. In one of those little eyewitness details that I think are so telling that the person who wrote it was there. One of the gospel writers records that he was asleep on a pillow. And eventually, in despair, the disciples shake him and they wake him up very roughly and they say to him, "Don't you care? We're going to drown." And Jesus wakes up and he rebukes the storm. He says, "Be calm, be still." And suddenly, within a few seconds, a raging storm is reduced to a mill pond and everything is completely calm. Now, what can we learn from that story? A few things, I think. First of all, that sometimes God can appear to be asleep. Sometimes God can appear to be asleep. And that's true if, for example, something terrible like cancer happens to us. We think, well, how can God allow that to happen? Or maybe we think, well, there is no God at all. But of course, God is not asleep, is he? He's not asleep. No, if there is a God who made the entire universe, he's certainly not asleep. But the disciples are tempted to doubt God's character. And that's been my experience as well. I'm tempted to doubt God's character. I'm tempted to doubt, why is he doing this? What's going on? And what they say to Jesus is kind of rude, really. Don't you care that we're going to drown? And we can be just like that, can't we? We can doubt if God exists, or if we believe he does exist, we can doubt that he really cares about us. He's just abandoned us. He's forgotten us, if you like. But something interesting happens in the story, which is as follows. When Jesus wakes up and he calms the storm, then the disciples are even more afraid. They're even more afraid in a complete mill pond, not a breath of wind, than they are in a raging storm when the boat is sinking and they think they're going to drown. Why? Why this paradox? Well, I suggest it's because they realize who this ordinary looking rabbi asleep in the boat is. This is no teacher. This is no good person. This is God, right? Only God can do that. And I would finish this short talk by saying two things. If you're a Christian, then God is in your boat and he will never leave you or forsake you. And he will bring you safe to the other side. That's what happens in the end, right? The disciples get out of the boat, dripping wet. And in their terror, they're actually closer to God because they realize more about who Jesus is. They realize more about who God is than if they just had a calm Sunday afternoon picnic sailing and gone from one side to the other. And if you don't have Jesus in your boat, and by that, I mean that you haven't put your trust in him, you haven't believed that he's the Son of God, then please, I implore you do that. Because one day, all of our boats are going to sink, aren't they, friends? All of our boats are going to sink because we're all going to die. The Bible says it's given to humans once to live, and after that, the judgment, right? One death, and after that, we meet God. But if we have God in our boat, and Jesus, if you like, invites himself into our boat, he says, believe in me, He says, I am the resurrection and the life. Then I believe he will bring me and he will bring all of us through death to the other side. Thanks so much for listening.